The first thing I caught wasn't a fish, but a wedding ring still attached to a finger that felt like cold, wet soap. I was 4 miles out on Blackwood Reach, a stretch of water so still it looked like polished obsidian, and the sun had just dipped below the horizon, leaving the world in that bruised purple twilight where the surface of the lake and the sky become indistinguishable. I've been fishing these waters since I was old enough to hold a pole, and I know the rhythm of the lake, but that night the water didn't ripple, it breathed. I was reeling in what I thought was a snagged line when the weight suddenly shifted, becoming a slow rhythmic pulsing that vibrated up through the graphite of my rod and into the marrow of my bones. When I finally pulled the line over the gunnel, I didn't find a lure or a fish but that pale waterlogged digit. And as I stared at it, the gold band on the finger began to glow with a faint, sickly luminescence that matched the bioluminescence of the algae beneath my boat. Rule 1 of deep water night fishing is that if you catch something that isn't a fish, you throw it back immediately without looking at it twice. But I couldn't move, because the water around my hull had started to hum a low-frequency vibration that made my vision blur. I looked over the side, and instead of my reflection, I saw a face looking back at me from 10 feet down. But the eyes were positioned where the mouth should be, and it was mimicking the exact shape of my own hand as I gripped the railing. If you've ever felt the absolute weight of the water pushing up against the bottom of your boat, as if something were trying to displace the air you breathe, you know the feeling of a predator that doesn't need to move to hunt you. I didn't drop the finger. I watched as the skin began to translucent, revealing a series of small black stones inside the bone, each one carved with a tiny screaming mouth. The lake wasn't silent anymore. It was filled with the sound of 1,000 small wet slaps against the aluminum hull, like thousands of tiny hands trying to find a grip on the metal. I turned the ignition, but the engine didn't roar. It made a sound like a human voice trying to clear its throat, a dry, raspy cough that ended in my own name being whispered by the exhaust manifold. Every few minutes on that lake, a new rule of physics seemed to dissolve, starting with the horizon line, which began to tilt until I felt like I was rowing up the side of a mountain of water. Rule 2. If the mist starts to smell like old copper and damp lace, do not turn on your spotlight. I made the mistake of clicking the beam on, and the light didn't cut through the fog. It stayed flat against it, like a projected movie on a screen, showing me a version of my own boat already docked at the pier, with me standing on the shore, waving at the version of me still trapped on the water. I realized then that the lake wasn't just deep. It was a vertical labyrinth, a series of layers where time was being compressed by the pressure of the depths. I started documenting the patterns of the ripples, noticing that they were forming perfect concentric circles around my boat, even though there was no wind. The circles were shrinking, pulling the surface tension tighter and tighter until the boat began to groan under the atmospheric pressure. I found a collection of old rusted fish hooks in my tackle box that I didn't remember buying, and every single one was baited with a piece of a photograph from my own childhood, showing moments I had completely forgotten. The day my dog died, the first time I felt the sting of a wasp, the look on my mother's face when she thought I wasn't looking. I realized then that the lake was fishing for me, using my own memories as the lure. New discoveries surfaced every time the boat drifted over a deep trench. The sonar would show massive stationary objects shaped like cathedrals resting on the silt, and the depth finder would jump from 60 feet to 3,000 in a single second. Rule 3. If you hear a bell ringing from beneath the keel, do not count the tolls. I heard it at midnight, a deep bronze tolling that vibrated the floorboards of the boat, and with every strike the water became clearer until I could see all the way to the bottom, where hundreds of people were standing in rows, their hair floating upward like stalks of pale wheat, all of them looking up at my hull with eyes that were nothing but solid, polished obsidian. I realized then that I wasn't the only one who had caught that ring. I looked back at the finger in my hand, and it had grown, the skin stretching and hardening until it looked like a piece of bleached driftwood, and the ring had moved to my own finger, refusing to come off. The boat began to sink, not because of a leak, but because the water was becoming less dense, turning into a thick, lavender-scented gas that I could barely stay afloat in. I reached for the oars, but they had turned into human arms, the palms pressing against the surface of the lake with a rhythmic rowing motion that I wasn't controlling. Rule 4. Never trust the shore if the lights are the wrong color. I could see the pier now, but the streetlights were a deep, bruised purple, and the person standing there waving at me was wearing my father's old yellow raincoat, even though my father has been buried 3 towns over for a decade. I rowed toward the light, but the more I pulled, the further the shore receded, as if the land were afraid of what I was bringing back with me. I've dealt with these types of spatial shifts on the water before, but the Reach was different because it didn't just want to drown me. It wanted to record me. I found the logbook in my lap and realized the ink was moving, rewriting my entries into a list of names of people who haven't been born yet. And my name was at the very bottom, underlined in that same dark, viscous fluid I saw in my dreams. The humming from the water was a roar now, a frequency that made the glass of my watch shatter, and the hands of the watch started spinning backward so fast they looked like a solid disc. The ending of the night didn't bring the sun. It only brought a transition. The pier is gone now, replaced by an endless expanse of grey, glassy water that reflects a sky with no stars. I'm still in the boat, but the oars have stopped moving and the arms are just resting on the surface, waiting for a signal. I can hear the bells starting to toll again, but it's not coming from the bottom anymore. It's coming from inside my own chest. If you're fishing tonight and you feel a pulse in your line that matches your heartbeat, cut the wire. Don't look at the ring. The water isn't just cold, it's remembering you one ripple at a time, and the Reach never lets a good lure go to waste. I can see you now, sitting on the bank with your rod, watching the purple twilight. You think the water is still, but if you look closely at your reflection, you'll see that I'm the one looking back at you, holding a finger that feels like soap, waiting for you to cast your line so we can finally swap places. The mist is coming in now, smelling of copper, and I've already turned the boat to meet you. Stay quiet, don't blink. The lake is almost finished with my name, and it's already starting to carve yours into the stones.